Betrayal, injustice, and loss push people to their limits in ways that seem unthinkable until they happen. In this video, we're documenting 6 cases where ordinary individuals made the fatal decision to take justice into their own hands, with consequences that destroyed multiple lives forever. It was March 15, 2017, in Bakersfield, California. The afternoon was clear and warm. Dmitry Volkov, 34, was an auto mechanic at a quick lube service center who had been struggling financially after losing his previous job at a dealership 6 months earlier. He lived in a modest rental home with his wife of 8 years and their 2 young children. 3 weeks prior, Dmitry had discovered his wife's affair through text messages on her phone. Court records later revealed a prior domestic violence incident involving Dmitry and his wife from 18 months earlier, resulting in a restraining order that had since expired. Neighbors later reported seeing Dmitry sitting on his front porch late at night in recent weeks, appearing agitated and drinking beer. His work supervisor noted that Dmitry had been calling in sick more frequently and seemed distracted during his shifts. That afternoon, Dmitry drove his pickup truck to a budget roadside motel on Ming Avenue, where his wife had been meeting Ezra Blackwood, 28, an unemployed construction worker who had been laid off from a housing project 3 months earlier. Dmitry had retrieved a tire iron from his garage before leaving home. Security footage showed him parking in the motel lot at 3:15 p.m. and walking directly toward a room 127. The motel clerk later testified to seeing a man force entry into room 127 at approximately 3:20 p.m. after the occupants failed to respond to aggressive knocking. The clerk described hearing the door frame splinter as it was kicked open. According to a witness in an adjacent room, loud commotion including shouting and impact sounds was heard for several minutes, followed by sudden silence. The same witness observed a man in work clothes fleeing the scene in a pickup truck, driving erratically through the parking lot. Security footage from the adjacent gas station confirmed the vehicle's license plate number and showed the truck running a red light while exiting onto Ming Avenue. Police arrived at Dmitry's residence 3 hours later and arrested him without incident. He was found sitting in his driveway, still wearing the same work clothes captured on surveillance footage. Ezra Blackwood was found deceased in the motel room with multiple blunt force trauma injuries to the head and torso. Investigators found no evidence that Dmitry's wife was inside the room at the time of the attack. Blood spatter analysis indicated the attack occurred near the room's entrance, with evidence of defensive wounds on Blackwood's hands and forearms. The coroner's report documented severe skull fractures, subdural hematoma, and facial bone displacement. The official cause of death was traumatic brain injury with extensive intracranial hemorrhage due to repeated blunt force trauma. The tire iron recovered from Dmitry's truck tested positive for blood matching Blackwood's DNA. During the investigation, police discovered Dmitry had called in sick to work that day and had been monitoring his wife's movements for several days. Phone records showed he had driven past the motel on 2 previous occasions. Dmitry was sentenced to 15 years to life for second-degree murder, with the prior domestic violence incident serving as an aggravating factor. The judge noted the deliberate decision to bring a weapon and the brutal manner of the attack. His children were placed with relatives, while his wife relocated to another state. The motel installed additional security cameras and reinforced door frames throughout the property following the incident. It was February 8, 2017, in Clarksville, Tennessee. The morning was cold with frost covering the rural farmland. Iris Holloway, 29, had been unemployed since 2015 and spent nearly 2 years caring full-time for her mother during a prolonged battle with pancreatic cancer. She lived in the family farmhouse, rent-free, managing medications, medical appointments, and daily care until her mother's death in August 2016. Her brother, Caspian Holloway, 35, worked as a used car salesman in Nashville and visited the farm only a handful of times during the illness. After their mother's death, competing wills surfaced during probate. Iris produced a will dated 6 months earlier, leaving her the farm and estate. Caspian submitted a second will, allegedly signed 2 weeks before the death, naming him sole beneficiary. The dispute dragged on for 6 months, draining both siblings financially. During document review, Iris's attorney discovered practice sheets in Caspian's handwriting, attempting to replicate their mother's signature. Handwriting analysis supported forgery claims, prompting an emergency hearing. Although the court scheduled a final ruling, Iris no longer believed the probate case alone would resolve what she saw as deliberate betrayal by her brother. The discovery prompted an emergency court hearing where the forgery evidence was presented. Caspian's attorney requested a continuance, but the judge scheduled a final ruling for the following week. Iris had borrowed money from relatives to pay legal fees and faced the possibility of losing both the farm and the funds invested in the case. After the hearing, Iris no longer believed the probate case alone would resolve what she saw as deliberate betrayal by her brother. Following the court hearing, Iris returned to the farmhouse where she had arranged to meet Caspian to discuss the forgery evidence. She retrieved a .30-06 hunting rifle from a locked gun cabinet in the barn, a weapon their father had used for deer hunting before his death 5 years earlier. Caspian arrived at 2:30 p.m., accompanied by his girlfriend, who remained in their car initially. A cousin who had been helping with farm maintenance was present in the kitchen when the confrontation began. The cousin later testified that Iris entered and directly addressed Caspian about the practice sheets, presenting photocopies as evidence. The girlfriend, who had entered the house during the discussion, witnessed the shooting occur in the kitchen after Caspian admitted to forging their mother's signature. She testified that Caspian became defensive and made disparaging comments about their deceased mother's mental state. The single gunshot struck Caspian in the chest at close range, causing him to collapse near the kitchen table. Police arrived within 20 minutes to find Iris waiting on the front porch with the rifle placed on the ground beside her. She confessed immediately upon their arrival. The cousin corroborated the sequence of events and Caspian's admission of forgery. The coroner determined death resulted from a single gunshot wound to the chest, causing massive internal bleeding and hemorrhagic shock. The bullet had severed major blood vessels and damaged vital organs, resulting in rapid blood loss and death within minutes. Prosecutors argued the killing was intentional despite emotional provocation, given that Iris had armed herself before the confrontation. Iris received 15 years for voluntary manslaughter after pleading guilty. The forged will was invalidated by the court, but under Tennessee law, Iris was barred from inheriting due to her conviction. The farm became subject to further probate proceedings and was ultimately sold to satisfy estate claims and legal costs. It was November 16, 2017, in Phoenix, Arizona. The afternoon was clear and warm. Lysander Reyes, 33, worked as a petroleum engineer on offshore drilling platforms in the Gulf of Mexico, spending 4 weeks at sea followed by 2 weeks on shore. He had been divorced from Valentina Reyes, 29, for 18 months after a contentious custody dispute over their 4-year-old son, Diego. Family court records showed joint custody, with Diego primarily residing with his mother during Lysander's offshore rotations, despite his documented concerns about Valentina's prescription drug history. The custody arrangement required daily video calls while Lysander was offshore. In early November, Diego failed to appear on 4 consecutive calls. Valentina claimed the child was sleeping or visiting relatives, but Lysander grew alarmed when she stopped responding altogether. On November 12th, Lysander's sister contacted Child Protective Services after seeing Diego through a window, appearing lethargic and noticeably thinner. A welfare check the following day found the child severely malnourished, dehydrated, and living in unsanitary conditions with no edible food. Diego was hospitalized in critical condition. Medical staff documented extreme weight loss, untreated infections, and evidence of prolonged neglect. Valentina tested positive for methamphetamine and admitted to leaving the child alone for extended periods. Diego died on November 14th from complications related to starvation and organ failure. Valentina was arrested and charged with child abuse, resulting in death. Lysander received notification while still offshore and arranged emergency transport back to Arizona. 3 weeks later, Valentina was released on bond. Upon learning of her release, Lysander drove to her apartment complex, setting the stage for the confrontation that followed. Lysander confronted Valentina in the apartment complex parking lot at approximately 3:30 p.m. as she returned from court-mandated drug counseling. A resident in a nearby building overlooking the lot observed the two arguing loudly near Valentina's parked car. Witnesses described Lysander gesturing aggressively while blocking her path as she attempted to walk away. As the argument escalated, Valentina moved toward the sidewalk bordering the lot. Surveillance cameras later showed Lysander returning to his pickup truck and starting the engine. Seconds later, the vehicle accelerated forward, striking Valentina from behind and pinning her briefly against a concrete curb before coming to a stop. The impact was forceful enough to throw her to the ground several feet away. Multiple witnesses immediately called 911. Security footage from the complex captured the collision and showed Lysander remaining inside the vehicle momentarily before exiting and sitting on the curb nearby. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes. Valentina was found unresponsive with severe blunt force injuries. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was multiple traumatic injuries, including crushed internal organs and catastrophic internal bleeding consistent with a forceful vehicle impact at close range. Police recovered the truck at the scene and secured video footage from both the apartment complex and a nearby traffic camera. Lysander was taken into custody without resistance and later admitted responsibility for the collision. Prosecutors charged Lysander with second-degree murder, citing the deliberate use of a vehicle as a weapon. Following a prolonged confrontation, he later accepted a plea agreement and was sentenced to 22 years in prison. It was June 14, 2018, in Springfield, Missouri. A humid evening settled over an abandoned construction site where uneven concrete, loose gravel, exposed rebar, and temporary platforms created unstable footing. Serafina Moss, 26, worked as a registered nurse and lived nearby with her 8-year-old daughter. For nearly 3 years, she had been in a volatile relationship with Jonathan Grimm, 34, an unemployed construction worker who had been laid off the previous year. Hospital records later documented 4 separate emergency visits tied to injuries consistent with domestic violence, including fractured ribs, facial bruising, and a wrist fracture. Police had responded to multiple disturbance calls, but Serafina had never followed through with charges. In the weeks before the incident, Serafina had quietly taken steps to leave. She arranged for her daughter to stay with relatives and began separating shared belongings. According to investigators, she contacted Jonathan earlier that day and asked him to meet her at the abandoned site to retrieve tools and personal items he had left behind when he moved out temporarily. The location was familiar to him from prior work and largely unlit after sunset. Jonathan arrived shortly after 9 p.m. Cell records and nearby traffic cameras placed both individuals at the site. Witnesses from a nearby warehouse later reported hearing raised voices echoing through the open structure. The argument centered on money, control, and Jonathan's belief that Serafina was attempting to ruin him financially. No witnesses reported seeing physical contact, only sustained shouting and the sound of movement across the concrete. Investigators later concluded, based on scene reconstruction and phone location data, that Serafina had been standing near the edge of a temporary elevated platform overlooking a lower concrete slab approximately 12 feet below. The platform had no railing and was never intended for pedestrian use. During the confrontation, Jonathan advanced toward her in an agitated state. As he moved forward, he lost his footing on loose gravel near the edge. Jonathan fell forward off the platform, striking the lower concrete surface head first. The impact was audible to nearby workers who described a sharp, singular sound followed by silence. Serafina was seen moments later moving away from the edge and calling 911. Emergency responders arrived within 10 minutes. Jonathan was found unresponsive with severe head trauma. He was transported to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The coroner later ruled the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head, resulting in catastrophic brain injury. During the investigation, prosecutors examined the events leading up to the fall. Scene analysis confirmed the platform's instability and lack of guardrails. Digital evidence showed Serafina had deliberately chosen the location and initiated the confrontation there. Witnesses confirmed the argument escalated verbally, and investigators concluded she understood the risk posed by the environment. Prosecutors argued that although she did not physically push Jonathan, she acted recklessly by initiating a high-stress confrontation in a known hazardous setting. Both sides later acknowledged significant trial risks. And Serafina accepted a plea deal to involuntary manslaughter in the first degree. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison. and the death was ruled a criminal act, resulting from reckless conduct rather than an accident. It was July 19, 2016, at Lake Louisville in North Texas. The evening was hot, with the sun dropping low and the water crowded with small groups finishing workday outings. Along one shallow cove, a floating dock sat a few yards from shore, anchored near a rocky drop-off where the lake floor dropped from waist-deep to over 10 feet within a few steps. Aaron Pineda was 27 years old and worked as an inventory clerk at a regional warehouse. He wasn't well known outside his job, and a small circle of friends he had known since high school. People described him as unreliable but generally easygoing. He borrowed money often and missed shifts, but no one had cut him off completely. Among that group was Marcus Ellison, 28, a forklift operator at the same warehouse. The two had been close until earlier that year, when Marcus was fired after inventory went missing during a shift Aaron supervised. An internal review later showed Aaron had used Marcus's login access to move and sell inventory. Aaron denied responsibility and never corrected management. Marcus lost his job, his health insurance, and his apartment within weeks. Friends gradually stopped inviting him out. Despite that, Marcus continued showing up when group plans came together. Several people later said he seemed calmer than expected, quieter, and less reactive. The lake outing had been planned for a coworker's birthday. About a dozen people gathered near the dock around 6:30 p.m. Alcohol was passed around, and some people swam while others sat on the dock. Aaron arrived wearing jeans and heavy sneakers. More than one person noticed and joked that he should take them off before getting in the water. As the group spread out, Aaron entered the lake near the edge of the dock. The water was shallow at first, reaching his waist, but sloped quickly toward the deeper section of the cove. Marcus stayed on the dock, watching. Witnesses later said Marcus pointed toward the darker water and told Aaron it stayed shallow farther out. Aaron moved away from the dock, stepping carefully at first. As he reached the edge of the drop-off, the floating dock shifted. Several witnesses said Marcus stepped hard onto one side of it, causing a sudden tilt and wave. Aaron lost his balance and slipped forward. His foot struck submerged rocks near the ledge, and he went under briefly before resurfacing farther out. People on the dock shouted. Some thought Aaron was joking or struggling because of the alcohol. Aaron attempted to stay afloat, but appeared to have trouble keeping his legs under him. Witnesses said Marcus remained still, watching from the dock, while others hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. Within seconds, Aaron slipped under again near the rock shelf. One person jumped in, but by the time they reached the spot, Aaron was no longer visible. The water in that section was over 12 feet deep, and visibility was poor as the light faded. Aaron's body was recovered later that night near the submerged rocks below the drop-off, in water measuring just over 12 feet deep. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was drowning, with blunt force injuries to one leg consistent with striking submerged rocks during the fall. Alcohol was present in his system, but was not listed as the primary cause of death. Witness statements centered on Marcus's behavior before the incident, including directing Aaron toward the deeper section of the cove and abruptly shifting the floating dock as Aaron moved past. Investigators concluded the location choice and dock movement created a foreseeable risk that led directly to the fall. Marcus Ellison was charged with manslaughter under Texas law based on reckless conduct that created a foreseeable risk in a known hazardous area. He later accepted a plea agreement and was sentenced to 14 years in state prison. The case closed with the death ruled a criminal act caused by reckless actions rather than an accident. It was September 22, 2015, in East Oakland, California. The evening was clear with light wind. Zephyr Caldwell, 22, had been unemployed since dropping out of community college the previous year. He lived with his grandmother in a 2-bedroom apartment and was associated with a local crew that operated drug sales in the area around Elmhurst. 2 weeks prior, his cousin, 24, had been killed by Joaquin Vega during a dispute over drug territory near a nearby transit station. Zephyr and his cousin had been raised together by their grandmother after both their mothers struggled with addiction. The shooting that killed his cousin had occurred during a confrontation over sales territory, with witnesses reporting that Joaquin had fired multiple shots after a brief argument. Police had identified Joaquin as the shooter through surveillance footage, but he had not been arrested due to witness intimidation and lack of cooperation with investigators. Zephyr learned through street contacts that Joaquin would be at an apartment complex on 73rd Avenue near Bancroft, where he regularly conducted business. Zephyr obtained a .38 caliber revolver through an associate and positioned himself in a parking area across from the complex at approximately 8 p.m. He waited for nearly 3 hours, with investigators later concluding he was timing the attack to catch Joaquin alone after activity in the area had slowed. During his wait, Zephyr observed several people entering and leaving the apartment complex, including known drug users and dealers familiar to the neighborhood. Security cameras from a nearby liquor store captured Zephyr's vehicle parked in the lot during this time frame, corroborating witness accounts of his presence. When Joaquin emerged alone around 11 p.m., Zephyr approached on foot from behind a parked car. A neighbor sitting on a nearby porch testified to hearing someone call out before multiple gunshots were fired. Joaquin attempted to flee toward the apartment complex entrance, but collapsed in the courtyard after being struck several times in the back and legs. An apartment resident looking out her window witnessed the shooter standing over the victim briefly before departing on foot toward the parking area. She described seeing the shooter fire additional shots at close range before running. Investigators later matched bullets recovered from the victim to the .38 caliber revolver, linked to Zephyr through forensic analysis. Cell tower data confirmed Zephyr's phone was in the area during the shooting time frame, and text messages recovered from his device included references to handling business and making things right. A confidential informant later provided information linking Zephyr to the weapon acquisition and his stated intentions for revenge. Zephyr was arrested 2 days later after being identified by witnesses in a lineup. During questioning, he initially denied involvement, but later admitted to the shooting when confronted with physical evidence. The coroner's report documented 4 gunshot wounds to the torso and extremities, with the fatal injury being a shot to the chest that severed the pulmonary artery. The official cause of death was exsanguination due to severed major blood vessels and organ damage, with death occurring within minutes of the shooting. Zephyr was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 50 years to life. The term included a mandatory firearm enhancement for personally discharging a weapon that caused death. The judge noted the premeditated nature of the crime during sentencing. Authorities later noted increased tension in the area following Joaquin's death, though no additional charges were filed in connection to the case. Zephyr's grandmother was forced to relocate due to threats from the victim's associates. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.